Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, an entitled Karen sold my inherited house before I could even move in. Without wasting any more time, let's dive right into the story. So I've lived in the same neighborhood my entire life, which has an advantage of me knowing a lot of people here, the layout of the land and who to avoid. My family home for this story will be referred to as my mother's home. That was where I grew up, and I remember my mom complaining a lot about getting HOA advertisements, and I was young and didn't know what an HOA was, so I remember asking her when I was 10 or so. She told me back then that an HOA was a few people that wanted to make rules to tell people what they could and couldn't do with their houses. Basically like how my school was allowed to tell kids not to wear hats or any clothing with skulls on them. Then she explained that rules were good since I was a kid, and she didn't want to explain the concept of some rules being wrong. But mom also told me that we did not live in an HOA but next to one. And this was back in the 90s, so she actually pulled out a map and drew a circle to try and explain things to me better. Well, as I became an adult, I knew more about HOAs and why my mother was glad that she was not part of one of them. When I got a job and started making money, the housing market was amazing, and I was able to get a house in the same neighborhood as my mother, making sure that it was not within the HOA either. Well, about 5 years later, I actually bought a second property in that neighborhood, which was a pretty rundown house. I fixed it myself and decided to rent it out to make some extra money on the side, and possibly sell it one day. Time passed more and the neighborhood I was in became even more desirable, and prices now started to go up considerably, around the 800k range on average for a property that was only about a quarter of an acre. Good school districts and low crime areas can do that, so I was pretty glad I already had my house cheap and was still able to make money renting out the other property. Of course, this life was not HOA free despite not actually living within the HOA. Both my mother and I were getting constant letters about how great the HOA was and that we needed to sign up and join. Seriously, it was junk mail to me since I knew neither one of my properties was within the HOA boundaries. So I ignored it and tried my best to ignore the woman that was now running the entire thing. A woman that I actually personally knew. Karen was the bane of my existence before I was even a teenager. She was the mother of another student in my grade that I was friends with at some point. That friendship ended quickly after I found out that his mother was insane. I remember going over there once to trade some Pokemon cards, and she started screaming that I was corrupting her son, and she chased me out of the house with a broom. Then she tried to call the school and get me in trouble for no reason. I avoided Karen after that, but she ended up when I was in high school at the head of the PTA and basically ruined any chance of fun when we were able to have. She got our senior trip cancelled, made senior prank punishable by not graduating, and even shut down our play in my sophomore year, claiming that Hamlet was too violent. When I learned that she was the one now in charge of an HOA, I was basically just thanking God that I did not get a house within there, because I knew that if she was making rules, they were gonna be horrible. My mother passed away after getting very sick, and since I was her only child, I ended up getting the house too. I did not plan on having 3 properties all within the same neighborhood, it just kind of happened. And I guess that getting that last one seemed to be the tipping point for Karen, because instead of meeting with me and giving me condolences like everybody else, she decided to basically verbally attack me. Karen, you're being extremely unfair. I cannot believe that you're really trying to just buy out the entire neighborhood. Me, I'm not buying out anything. If you have not noticed, my mother just died. I don't really care about your weird obsession with my property right now. Karen, and I see you are just as rude as when you were a boy. That woman clearly did not do a good job. Me, if you're gonna insult me then go ahead, I'm an adult now and you cannot scare me off. But don't talk about how my mother raised me right after she died. If anybody here has no manners, it is you. Karen, you should not be allowed 3 properties in one neighborhood. It gives you too much power. Power over what, I did not know, and I was not gonna stay near her and try to ask her what she was talking about. I knew she was crazy already, so I just decided to back off. With how I was feeling, one more nasty comment from her about my mom might have landed her in the hospital and me in jail. She did not stop at that one day though, and I started getting letters from the HOA in the mail with all sorts of fines for not following rules. Again, I don't own a single property within the HOA, so these were pointless and just done to try and upset me. I had enough going on in my life trying to sort out an entire funeral and my own depression from losing my mother. Things kind of just fell to the wayside, which might be a reason that Karen got away with what she did next. I found out that my mother's house had been sold right under my nose. As you can imagine, I was confused and spent a day running around to find out who had sold the house and profited from it. I did some digging, but of course all roads led back to Karen, and I was able to get the paperwork from the town hall to see exactly what had gone down with the home. There were documents that I never signed, making Karen my legal representative as it came to my mother's estate, which was just a house basically. She had sold it on my behalf apparently, and even put the money in an account with my name on it that I never knew about. An account that, when I was finally able to access, only had a few $1,000s in it. She had cleared it out to give herself a nice payday on top of everything. Karen was a lawyer, which I guess is how she knew what paperwork to fake in order to get things done. I just knew that I was not gonna play nice and Karen was gonna pay for what she did. I went to the next HOA meeting and decided to call Karen out right in front of everybody. She of course played the victim and acted as if the entire thing was actually legal, claiming that the house was sold legally and she could be a representative since it was an HOA home, which of course it wasn't. Now claiming that I was harassing her and trying to ruin her name, I knew it would not work, but I didn't care. I got evidence of copies of the paperwork, which included the HOA being mentioned, which I knew would be her downfall. I contacted the real estate office she worked with, the bank where she opened the account to get withdrawal history, and anything else I could think of. I even contacted the new owners of the house and explained to them that their purchase might not have been legal or valid. They were upset but not at me and understood that I just wanted to give them fair warning they might end up in court to answer questions and their home purchase might get invalidated. What I didn't expect were the homeowners to actually be furious about the whole thing, and they helped me out more than they had to. I found out that Karen was even charging them for the HOA that they did not even realize they were not in the zone of. I took severe legal action against Karen, both in the civil court for the whole fact that she stole money, and of course the criminal court for the forgery and theft. Karen did not even have a chance in court, especially when she decided it would be a smart idea to represent herself. She had no case legally and was found guilty of forging paperwork to steal my house and sell it in order to then take the money. Also, she was in trouble for illegally taking HOA funds from people that were not within the zone to even be members. Karen was no longer going to be a part of the HOA because instead she was going to be very busy going to jail. And by the way, sorry Ripe stars, but I had to censor a lot of personal information there. My apologies. Anyway, as for civil matters, she was also forced to return all the money she took from the account she set up back into it. From there, the buyers were given back their money, plus some they personally got from Karen for the trouble they went through. The house deed was restored to me in turn, and I was able to finally have some peace in my life for the first time since my mom died. I decided that I wanted to move back into that house instead of renting it out. Instead, I rented out the house that I had originally bought for myself. Being back in my childhood home just felt right, and I felt close to my mom this way. I decided to use some of the money that I had gotten from Karen in order to actually help the community, the thing that Karen always claimed to be doing it all, but never seemed to really help. I created a fundraiser for the local business in the neighborhood, and it was great to see how many people wanted to come and help, donating money and time to create a big event that actually helped people. It made me feel good, and part of me thinks my mom was watching me that day, and I can only hope she was proud of the person I turned out to be. I knew at the very least, if she's watching, that she got a kick out of me destroying Karen after all of these years of not being able to do a damn thing about her. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. My great uncle passed away at 97, and I heard this great story of malicious compliance at his memorial service today. He worked for over 50 years at the same confectionery factory, and for most of that time he was a boiler room attendant. This was just after World War II, and at the time most of the machines and processes were powered by steam, even the heating. The steam was generated by massive boilers, and it was his job to monitor the boilers to make sure nothing went wrong. These boilers could potentially explode, causing great damage. By law, the boiler had to be attended at all times, and there were shifts that watched them around the clock, even when the factory was closed. They took so long to heat up that it was easier and cheaper to leave them just running at night. After about 10 years of no incidents, the company hired a leading hand who would also act as the safety officer. He had been a sergeant in the army, and he took his job quite seriously, being quite the disciplinarian. He instituted a multitude of new procedures, some warranted, some just to establish control. The first time he wanted to conduct a fire drill, he went around telling staff that when they heard the alarm, they had to exit the building in an orderly fashion. He got to the boiler room, and it was my great uncle on duty that day. He informed him that he would not be able to evacuate with everyone else and had to stay with the boiler. The safety officer didn't give him the time to explain why, he just bluntly informed him that he was to treat the fire drill as if it was a real fire and no exceptions. When the fire bell rang, finally, my uncle did exactly what he was told to do. He turned off the gas to the boilers, vented all the built-up steam, purged the water, and joined everyone outside. At the evacuation point, they were doing a head count when the production manager spotted my uncle and immediately approached him and asked what he was doing away from the boiler. He said he was participating in the fire drill as instructed, but not to worry, as he had shut the boiler down completely. The color immediately drained from the manager's face. He was asked how long it would take to bring the boilers back online. Apparently, it would take hours alone just to fill the boilers with water and heat them up. The big issue was that because they had done an emergency purge, they were required to inspect every pipe, joint and connection for damage before to make sure it was safe to start to reheat. The other boiler men were called in and they got paid double time to work through the night to get the boiler ready for the next day. Production staff all got sent home but still got paid for the day as it wasn't their fault the factory couldn't run. It cost them a day's production as well. Safety officer did keep his job, but for the next 40 years the boiler staff were all exempt from fire drills. And the next one is titled, I moved out and took everything. So it became apparent to me last week that my roommates were trying to drive me out of the house to get one of their boyfriends in on my lease. When I told them that I wanted to stay, they started staging incidents and messes around the house so they could yell at me for them, and it all came to a head when they called a meeting with me 2 days ago. One of them had to hold the other back as she screamed at me that she hated me and I was not welcome in the building. They proceeded to tell me that I contributed nothing to the house and wasted their space, and they had gotten in with the landlady and convinced her to not renew my lease in June. I told them I would talk to the landlady, and when they said they were the heads of the house, I laughed and went on with my day. I spoke to the landlady and she acknowledged that they were out of hand, and while she had given them the power to not renew my lease, she also said I could move out whenever and not pay for a single day I was not there. So then yesterday, when my roommates both left to visit family, they are sisters, I immediately called everyone I knew and vacated the house of everything I own. I took the curtains, the rugs, all the cat toys, and even the cat tower that I had made with my mom. I took off all of their things off my shelves and other furniture and stacked them in the middle of the now nearly empty living room. I snapped pictures of everything, handed the keys to the landlady, and immediately effed off. They won't be back to the house until tomorrow. I've blocked them on everything so I won't get any angry messages, but I'm sure their faces will be priceless when they come home to a half-empty house with hundreds of dollars in storage and furniture gone. So much for me not contributing anything to the house. Now I actually don't. They also have to find someone else to take up the lease until the boyfriend can move in when June comes around, or they have to pick up my rent. It feels pretty good. Update to the story: it took a while for things to settle down, but I'll just post a quick update on how everything is going. I emailed my attorney asking if the screenshots I took of my landlady's text saying I could leave with no financial repercussions would protect me if she somehow changed her mind and wanted to charge me rent. He said I was good to go and would be covered by it. A lot of people are asking about whether or not my roommates will actually have to pick up my rent. My lease specifically states if one tenant is not able to fulfill their portion of the rent, it will be up to the other tenants to make up the difference. I don't know if she will make an exception or not for them. She did tell me though that it will be their responsibility to get someone to lease my room until the boyfriend can move in June. Furthermore, the girls came back from visiting family today, so it's certain that they have seen the empty house now. Also, I've not gotten any calls from any officers about stolen goods, so I'm thinking I'm in the clear. Considering that I haven't actually stolen anything, they would be filing a false report, which is very illegal anyway, according to my attorney. And the big one, my boyfriend was pretty pissed by the whole situation. He heard the whole screaming meeting when they told me to leave, as he was up in my room when it happened, and he also observed the abusive texts and language they've sent and said to me, and confronted both of my roommates online about how they've been acting. They immediately went to their dad and he had the cops called. I don't know all of the details, and frankly I don't want to, because I have them blocked and I want nothing to do with them and just want my life to go on. But yeah, my boyfriend pretty much had to go to the station and sign some papers saying that he would leave them alone. I'm pretty pissed at him for confronting them, but like, the cops? Come on. Anyway, I'm couch surfing until I can get a place. I have 2 lined up that I'm very interested in, both of which have girls who I know and can trust. I think things are looking up, and hopefully this is the last time I have to think about this ever again. If something does happen, I'll be updating. Thanks to everyone for the support. It makes me feel really good knowing that number 1, I'm not the bad person here like the girls gaslighted me into thinking I was, and number 2, that my suffering did brighten some people's days. Hopefully if something like this happens to you, you use similar tactics. I would love to hear about it. Also, it was really encouraging to know that I'm not alone in having roommate issues. It was uplifting to hear other people's stories and how they got through it, sending lots of love. And now, Ripe Stars, we have a very special story. It is an Am I the A-hole story that has a final update. Since I know that many of you complained that usually the Am I the A-hole stories don't have an update. So from now on, I will try to find stories that have updates. Either way, this one starts like this. So one of my 29 male best friends, Carla, 31 female, is getting married soon. It's only meant to be a small backyard type of wedding, but they've been planning it for a few months now, and originally it was supposed to be on my property. They wanted it because it's private and has lots of open space for the reception, a nice view, and the house could be used for them to get ready and stuff. Of course I said yes. She and her fiance Rick were very happy. The thing is, Carla and I do have a history. We went out on and off in college but decided to stay friends. Then I met my wife, we got married, Carla met Rick, and now here they are. Now, my wife knows that I went out with Carla back in college and she did not really care. Carla still went to our wedding and everything. I never knew if Rick was told or not. It's not my relationship, therefore not my business to say anything, so I simply never did. Rick though found out recently, and not in the best way. Not sure how, but from what I heard from friends is that one mutual friend told him, no idea why, that we used to date. Not only that, but apparently Carla said a couple of years ago she was still in love with me when she was already dating Rick. Don't have actual confirmation if that's exactly what he was told. All Carla's told me is that Rick was told about our past and he is angry at her for never saying anything. It became quite a drama and I didn't hear from her for over a month until now. She told me that they are going to couples counseling and that the wedding is still on. However, Rick requested that I not attend. It sucks, but I totally get why he would not be comfortable, so then I asked the obvious question, where are they gonna hold the wedding then? To my surprise, she said they still want it at our place. Rick said so too, and in my mind I'm going, he doesn't want the guy who dated his fiancée years ago at the wedding, but he still wants the wedding at his house. My wife and I are expected to just not be at our home that weekend, and then I told Carla no. They are going to have to find someplace else since we are not going to simply leave our home to them for the weekend. Not only for safety reasons, but it just does not make sense. Rick does not want me around because he is not comfortable, but is comfortable enough to have their wedding at my house. They really want their wedding here though, and because of that I've been bugged by not only her, but also Rick and some friends who think that I'm being a petty a-hole for not letting them have the wedding here anymore. Honestly, I don't think that I am, it just doesn't make sense at all to me to leave our own place for a wedding we are no longer welcome to and leaving our home totally vulnerable. Still, being accused of sabotaging their wedding, and Rick believes it's the least that I can do after everything. So Reddit, am I the a-hole here? And yeah, Ripe Stars, please let me know what you think about this. Is OP the a-hole for not giving away his property for a wedding he's not invited to anymore? Either way, comment number 1 said, not the a-hole, that's not how this works. You don't get to be uninvited from a wedding that is literally in your backyard. You are being incredibly kind and they are being incredibly rude. Either you are allowed to come or they need to find a different venue. Wow, how entitled can you get? Comment number 2, not the a-hole. If he is uncomfortable by your presence, he is welcome to shell out a deposit on short notice for another venue. No way in hell would I allow myself to be run off my own property by an insecure man to use as he sees fit, even just for a day. Malicious destruction on top of typical wedding party mess? No thank you. And yeah guys, thankfully we have an update from OP here. It reads like this. So some stuff has happened recently and many of you have wanted an update on this. Appreciate the reassurance and understanding my decision when seems that many in this situation didn't. So basically I remained firm in my decision about not letting them use my property for their wedding. Even if they changed their mind about inviting us, which honestly I don't care about anymore. Rick's family, thanks to him, got a hold of my cell, so that was more people I had to deal with. I put my foot down with Rick a few days ago and told him directly that I will go to the police and press charges for harassment. I have all the texts and calls documented, also had a very long talk with Carla about everything going on. She apologized for it all and she knows it's her own fault. Well, she decided to be the one to call things off in the end. Some of my friends still seem to think it's my fault and I'm taking some distance from them for a while. And also from Carla after getting some confirmation on a few things that I needed to know. The whole thing is a mess. I'm only glad in the end that I didn't give in to their demands and the constant bugging has stopped. It was still a huge headache over the last few days and not the kind of drama that I want back in my life. Thank you to everyone who made me feel supported in this. It helped a lot not feeling like the only other person, aside from my wife, who thought their demand was insane and inappropriate. And yeah, Ripe stars, I gotta say, I'm so happy that OP did not give in to these entitled people. Honestly, how can you have even the audacity to demand that someone lends you their property for your wedding and then you insist that this person is not invited to your wedding, aka banned from his own property? Absolutely ridiculous. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.